this episode of the Business Communicators.
TikTok is ultimately banned in the United States. And I think it's only going to be exacerbated by what we saw this past Thursday with the balloon from China that was flying over Montana. If you don't think China isn't using ByteDance to spy on you, you're completely misguided.
You're listening to the Business Communicators.
Welcome to Season 5, Episode 1 of Business Communicators, the #1 podcast in the world for communications and marketing professionals. And again, it's a verified fact. My name is Austin Sadden, joined alongside my co-host, Hattie Horn, Thomas Bain, and you might recognize a familiar face who joined us on Season 4, who's now joining us as a additional co-host, Kim Davis. We're thrilled to have you as a new co-host on the show, so welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Happy Season 5.
Yeah, happy Season 5, and we've taken a nice little winter break. I guess an extended break, but like the groundhog who we saw, so I guess saw a shadow on February 2nd. We are back for Season 5, and Thomas, Hattie, how are things going on your end?
Everything's going. Like you said, it was great to have a nice winter break, although winter is not necessarily over for us. Feels like it's actually just starting the last week or so, given the chill and the ice and all the little wonderful magical things that winter is supposed to bring. But for the most part, it brought me the crud. But I'll get over it real quick.
We're hoping you're feeling better, but
Yeah,
I feel like that
absolutely.
was a perfect setup for Thomas, who is typically our weather guy.
I was going to say the past couple days here in Texas have been the absolute least favorite of all my weather. I wish it would either just be cold or snow, not cold, drizzle, wet, where the feels like it's 20 degrees cooler than it really is. But I've been enjoying the time off. Lots of things going on that are business related, and lots of things going on that are just life related. I know with all of us, we've had off the record conversations about, hey, did you see this article, or did you see what this news person said? Or, hey, I didn't know that the Athletica was bought by New York Times when they hired a bunch of their writers off. It's always great. And I always look forward to our public conversations as much as I look forward to our private conversations about what's driving society.
Yeah, it's always fun to be a part of the conversation. Even the group chat to me is a lot of fun. Whether or not we record, and just sharing articles, sharing opinions, thoughts, that kind of thing. It's exhilarating. I think it's important to have a group of communications professionals that you network with, that you share ideas and thoughts with. I think that's going to help you grow. It helps you keep informed. Then you can take some of those learnings back to your day job, which is always incredibly helpful. For me, I had a busy December, went to Japan, and then when I got home, I was the public information officer for an emergency response for 25 straight days of work. So it was nice to have a little bit of a reprieve in January. But I'm really excited to be back with all of you. I know we've got some fun things planned to our listeners. And again, if you want to follow our work, just search @BizCommunicator on all the social media platforms. You'll find us there. We're also on TikTok, but maybe not much longer. And we'll maybe get into that a little bit in the prediction phase of this episode. But of course, you can also stay updated with our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com. But Kim, I do want to start with you because for those that maybe missed the episode in which we had Kim on, she's been very plugged in here with the sports media landscape in Houston for quite a number of years. And Kim, it's been a wild ride for Houstonians. And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit last time we had you on the podcast about potential changes with the coaching staff here in Houston. Obviously, the Houston Texans fired Lovie Smith, the second straight year that they had fired a coach after one season. And they hired D'Amico Ryans. He was drafted in the second round of the 2006 NFL draft, was by the Texans, and was the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers this past year. He was hired on a 6-year deal. And you had the opportunity to, speak with D'Amico this past Thursday at his introductory press conference. What can you tell us about this coaching search, the way that you expected it to go from an ownership group, and kind of what they displayed over the last 2 to 3 years? And what were your thoughts on D'Amico Ryans itself?
It has been an interesting ride for sure. You know, when they fired their second coach in as many years, I thought it was just a bad idea for the organization, right? You it says something bigger about the way the organization's run, is what I thought at the time. But I will tell you, over the past 3 years, I've seen some things that are markedly different in the organization. And for someone who has been critical of how they've done business, and have had some, conversations with management, some conversations more so with the owners about their direction and their goals, and so I've been willing to give them some credit, right? To say that they are trying to do things differently. And, as any kind of business owner, if you think about it, and when a change is made, that's all that you can really hope for, is that, okay, we are not our most recent mistakes or our worst moves. So I say that to say there's been an excitement and an energy around this hiring of D'Amico Ryans, unlike I've covered, of course, the two most recent coaching hires. I remember covering Bill O'Brien. I remember when they hired Gary Kubiak, who's a native Houstonian, a beloved son of the city. This felt very different yesterday. And listen, the Kubiak thing was at the Hobby Center, right? It was like really a big deal. But yesterday felt very different. There were former players there were current players, and there was an energy. And I even said Cal McNair looked more comfortable than I'd ever seen him. Nick Casario looked more comfortable and was more conversational than I've ever seen them. So there are a number of things that, as communicators, we look at that tells us what this hire means for the organization. And it means it beyond football, because I think they got the right guy. And he obviously has a football IQ, but it's also who he is as a man, as a husband, as a father. I think all of those things matter as you come and try to lead an organization from the abyss, really. I mean, it's about as many people as on this podcast who are almost in the stadiums for games,
Yeah.
right? And so they've got a lot of work to do, and winning helps a lot, but they've got to rebuild faith with a fan base, and they've got to reestablish who they are as a culture. And all of us in our businesses, we probably have to talk to clients about that, right? And that's exactly what the Houston Texans are having to do right now. They're off to a great start, and they are including some different people in these conversations. You see the H-Town culture being embraced. You see, Paul Wall and, Bun B, and you see them trying to be a little broader in terms of how they do things, which is different for NFL owners, because that's not typically how they move. So,
Yeah, to me, it's really fascinating because, for me, I grew up an Oilers fan. And when the
yeah,
Oilers left Houston, I was devastated. Texans came in. I think the franchise, Mr. McNair was awarded it in 98, 99, and
2000.
2000. So the first
Hmm.
season was 2002.
Yes.
And, you know, they haven't made it to an AFC championship game. And the last 3 years have been really difficult as a fan. And like you mentioned, it was actually more expensive to go to a Katy High School game than to get in the door at a Houston Texans game, which is wild. But I like the parallels that you draw from business, because to me, the first thing that comes to mind is trust. You've got to be
Mhm.
able to um, win your customers and have trust and a positive relationship with your customers, which in this case is the fan base. So, Thomas and Hattie, I'll turn it over to you. Are there any parallels that you can see from a business perspective of trying to build back that credibility and maybe a company that has done it well?
First question I was going to ask is JJ Watt going to come back to the Houston Texans with the D'Amico Ryans hire and the JJ Watt taking over social media? But I think, to your point, that yeah, it is a business. Football is a big business. NFL is a big business, but it's also the pulse of the city. I think it shows the underlying feeling that across a lot of different companies in Houston that I'm starting to see is that, and some of it might also be at oil prices, oil and gas prices, because we have a big energy sector here. That companies are starting to take a step back, starting to realize, starting to focus on what's important. How do we get what we're trying to accomplish? I think companies that have done well doing that, a couple come to mind. I'm starting to see some that are not doing so well. Our city a little further west of here, with Tesla and Twitter. That's kind of up and down, and we've spoken about him for quite a bit. I don't know. I'm going to have to punt. I'll probably answer after Hattie answers. A company that's doing really well on hitting the reset button and taking a step back and being more open in their communications and doing it well.
No one. No. People talk really good game about connecting, with their customers, connecting with their employees, connecting with their communities, and they put all the right words out there. But what I will say is, if you're not engaging with those folks, one company that comes to mind right off the top of my head, and I don't want to shout them out, but I do want to shout them out, that seems to do a really good job of connecting with their employees, is Chevron internally. I have colleagues and friends who work for that company who have nothing but good things to say about, wow, I've got this great boss who supports me, who communicates with me really well. Our team is engaged because we feel like we're supported, those kinds of things. So, and I that's a big deal. And that's why people want to work for people. People don't just work for companies, they work for people. And they work for people who know how to connect with them and relate to them. And when you can relate to them, they don't have a problem helping you hit your bottom line, because they feel like they have a stake in the game, or skin in the game, as you call it. And communication, and not just any type of communication, but good communication is integral to any of that. So that's something that I see the Texans needing to do, is to be able to re-engage, their fans and the community. They've always done a really good job. When I was working in nonprofit, I thought, the Texans did a really good job in engaging the community, connecting with people that way. So rebuilding that fan base is going to be important, and being consistent in anything that they do moving forward is going to help people get a stronghold and feel like, oh, okay, I feel like I'm part of this, because I feel like they're investing in me. Not just talking smack or talking game. They're talking to me and speaking to me. So I feel that.
Yeah, I think the obvious correlation here is the Houston Astros. Great run in the 2005, 2004 seasons, making it to the NLCS, the World Series in 2005, and then during the Drayton McClain end of his tenure, in the first few years of Jim Crane's tenure as owner, the team was losing 100 games a season, and you could get tickets right behind the dugout for $10. It was, as an Astros fan, I loved it because I could go to games at an affordable rate. But since then, they've been to 6 straight American League Championship Series, 2 World Series wins since the 2017 season, and it's the model franchise here in Houston. So I think that the Texans organization can kind of maybe look to the Astros for the model of, okay, you can do it.
To a degree, I agree with
Yeah.
that. But one thing that I think the Astros do a better, this is just me, I think they do a better job of, is even when they were losing, they still had loyalty in their fans to some degree. And this is just me, my opinion. I've had friends who, they go to games because they're cheap and they were losing. Winning is a big part of it, yes, but they still did things to keep their fans engaged. And I thought they did a good job of that. And their communications team was really good.
And I think that's where the Houston Texans' J.J. Watt did a good job, was connecting with the community, connecting with the locals, like picking up random things. And I think the Texans took a blow when he said, I'm going to go play someplace else.
They relied on that one person to do that.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say I think it was a little bigger than that, right? I mean, because it was a number of things at that time, because that was at the end of the 2020 season. It was how how they handled 2020 and George Floyd and post George Floyd and then Bill O'Brien, and they'd gotten rid of. So it was JJ was the last thing you remember, but it was DeAndre Hopkins. It was a
Oh gosh,
number of
yeah.
things that they had done poorly. And the first thing is, I'm a Houstonian, so I feel okay saying this. Houston's a different sports town. You've got to win here.
Mhm.
Like, you can have great communications, and it's necessary because I remember covering the Texans at the time when they didn't win well and they still had people. So you can get them there. But the biggest thing in this market is you've got to win because we're a younger sports city. The Astros have been around a lot longer, right? But I don't necessarily think their communications team does a better job.
Oh no, definitely not.
I
I think the
I
Astros communication team is probably the worst
I
in
I
think they
think
baseball.
they did
are.
a good job.
I
This
think that
No.
they're nope. Their marketing people get it. Their communications people
Oh
are
yeah.
not nearly as inclusive. I'm just telling you because I work
Oh
with them. The
yep.
Texans, hands down, at this point, the last 2 years, far better. And so
Yeah.
what the Texans are doing now is they're getting outside a little bit of the NFL bubble. If you look around the league and how teams run and what they do, and they're kind of stagnant and they are taking some baby steps to reflect more of the city that they're in.
Mhm.
And that is something that I think that we've seen from the Astros more, but it's because they won.
Yeah. Just to Kim's point, I do want to kind of wrap it up with this. I fully agree with what she said about the Astros communications. The media relations department has been very difficult. I've spoken with multiple reporters who cover the team, and Evan Drellick, who actually works for the Athletic and has covered the Astros cheating scandal, actually went on the record with this in his new book, where he talks about being bullied by the Astros front office. And I know for a fact the Astros front office has tried to get multiple people thrown off the beat at times because they don't like the way that the team is being covered by them. So, yeah, from a media relations perspective, Houston Astros probably not your model franchise, but from a winning perspective, I would say they are the model franchise. But in terms of business leaders as a whole, Kim, did you want to add a thought there before moving on?
No, I agree. And here's the other thing I think that the Astros don't do as well. They embrace the changing media landscape as well. Right? You got to understand that it's not going to be just the couple radio stations or your media partner. People are getting their information other places. They've been
Yep.
slower to that. And I'm going to leave it at that
Yeah, I fully
because I
agree with
still
you.
need
I
to
think
be get my credentials.
I think baseball has been slow to that as well. Just if you
Mhm.
look at some of the access and footage, for TikTok, for example, and you look at NFL and NBA, there's so many highlights shared. Baseball, there's not that much. There's not many creators that are talking about it. So it's definitely because of access. That's a huge issue. But I do want to move on to something that Hattie actually shared in our group thread. And Hattie, I'll turn it over to you. But there's been some stories this week that have appeared about companies that were once very vocal on human rights and societal issues have held statements kind of close to the vest or stayed completely silent in recent weeks following tragedies that have happened within our country. And so if you can kind of just tell us a little bit about what's going on and some of your initial thoughts at this time.
We're reading about how companies are staying silent about tragedies and not wanting to speak about them. And in some cases, there's fatigue. Um, Folks are feeling like they're overwhelmed. They're hearing something every day, and it's just getting to the point where people are overwhelmed and they're wanting to hear something more hopeful. And so now CEOs themselves not communicating is because they're focused on business and economics, the bottom line. So their priorities have shifted. So it kind of goes both ways. There's that fine balance of when and where you talk about these things that are going on a regular basis, and it gets to the point where it sounds like folks are just kind of tired. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's kind of interesting because we've discussed this on the podcast before that if data has shown us that people want to hear from their leaders, right? That they want them to engage in topics like this. But we've said that that comes with a qualification, that if you are going to talk about tough issues that are happening in society, your company has to be about the action that you're taking, right? That you can't just talk the talk, you've actually got to walk the walk. And I think that's been difficult for a lot of companies. It's easy to put out a statement and say, all right, we've checked the box. Now we're going to go ahead and, stay silent. I mean, I think we brought this up in 2020, at least in some conversations we've all had. But you remember when after George Floyd was killed, a lot of people changed their Instagram profile pictures, or they posted just like a solid black
I was
image
one
on
of
their
them.
Instagram, and there were so many people doing it because it was quote unquote the trendy thing to do. And they felt like, hey, I can check the box, and I'm making this effort. And did those people make changes? No, they didn't. It was just so they could be perceived a certain way. And I think sometimes that's what's happening with these CEOs is they want to be perceived a certain way, but they're not really following through with it. And I'll go to Kim and Thomas here in a minute, but I do want to close with this. So I did see this article in Axios. It says that the CEO for this organization, Action for Diversity and Inclusion, which consists of 2,400 CEOs who publicly pledged to, quote, create more inclusive cultures while not being afraid of having difficult conversations about diversity and equity and inclusion, provided a no comment statement when asked about the recent situation in Memphis and the tragic death of Tyree Nichols. It's alarming to me that 2 years ago that was all the rage for CEOs to speak up, and now they're staying quiet. Whether or not that's the right decision, that's beyond my pay grade. But I do think it's good, at least, that some of these CEOs are saying, hey, we don't have all the information right now. We're not sure how this impacts us. It doesn't necessarily impact our business, so maybe we should not inject ourselves into a conversation in which we're not the subject matter experts in. So I don't know where the right angle is, but Kim, Thomas, will turn it over to you. You guys are smarter than me.
Again, I think you hit the nail on the head, the trendy thing. I think somebody does the right thing. Somebody launches a great marketing campaign. You said that everybody was jumping on the board because it was the trendy thing to do. And immediately what went back to my head was the Lance Armstrong Live Strong Foundation with those little yellow rubber bracelets that they had. And within like 18 months, every nonprofit organization had a rubber bracelet. And I think some of it also comes into play that by putting yourself out there, you're also getting the impressions back that people are starting to look at them under a microscope, because you see like the person who said everybody at the company gets paid $75,000, and then all of a sudden it comes out that he's a total weirdo.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
We've talked about the media influencer David Dobrik, and I think it's really interesting what's happening right now with Mr. Beast, who went out and paid for everybody to get the cataract surgery for people who are blind who couldn't afford it. And now you're having all the naysayers coming out, like, you're only doing it for publicity, you're only doing it for this. And I'm gonna say that I don't know if there's a right answer. I will say that if people are looking to you for an information, if people are looking to you for an opinion, you really should give it, but you should make sure you caveat it that this is my personal opinion, this is not my company's opinion. Because the people with the microphone, that's how change does happen. And a lot of the change that's taking place needs to happen. I don't know. I don't think we can force it down the people's throats. But at the same token, if you have the microphone, you have people who listen to you, just make, at least say, this is my opinion and this is why I believe it. Don't just say this is my opinion. And definitely don't say this is my company's opinion, because then that's where you wind up not having a job.
I remember when everybody was making these statements after after George Floyd was murdered in 2020, and I remember saying to people, and even saying on some of my social media platforms, if this isn't a space, that you've worked in and you've talked about in the past, don't feel compelled to make a statement. But if you make a statement, it's got to be something that's authentic. I sat on a board for an organization who released a statement that I thought was very sanitized, and it didn't make sense. I'm on the executive committee. They never ran it by me. So you had a group of, quite frankly, white men making this statement about something that they were really ill qualified and prepared to do because they thought they should say something. And what I said to the chair of our board back then was, if you're going to now talk about how committed you are to this work of diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've been talking about it for 40 years and nothing's happened. So you've got to tell people what's going to be different. I said, because at this point, we're in COVID. In 2 weeks, when the world shut down, you changed your business model on a dime. So it can be done, but it's not a priority. And I'm not going to say
Well,
it's okay, but I think you've got to be authentic. I think that's what it is. You've got to be authentic and not just say it because you think I should be on the bandwagon and I want to say I have a statement. Because what I've been doing, quite frankly, is going back and looking at companies that were all up front saying what they were going to do and to see what they've done, right? Ben and Jerry's had been doing the work. So for them to say, this is who we are, they had some equity in the space. I think the
mhm.
problem now is the CEOs are saying nothing. I think that's a bad idea. You're human. You don't have a thought. How is that
Yeah,
possible? It's a
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, and I love the analogy that you just gave about we saw how companies pivoted during COVID, working remotely. That's so true. Like you can change if you want to. You can have representation if you want to. But when, people are at the top, they're like, yeah, I'm not losing my job to someone else. It's kind of this selfish mindset. Once you get the power, you don't want to lose the power. And I know I've discussed this on the podcast, but I do want to bring it up again because I remember this is actually one of the reasons why I started another podcast, Cautious Coffee. So when I was at BP, I remember after George Floyd, we had this town hall meeting, and uh, it was our CEO, who was based in London, who's British, and the chairman of the board, who also European, can't remember which country. They didn't have any representation from America. They wanted to talk about this issue in America. Had two Europeans on a town hall company meeting talking about it, and the chairman, toward the end of it, he said, it's really important to remember that all lives matter. And I was like, how tone deaf can you be to the situation that's going on in the country and use that term? So I think you have to have the right people having these discussions, and you need to not only have them, but you need to show people what you are doing, have targets, have goals, and meet those, be publicly held accountable for those targets. But I do think it's interesting to see how some of these companies have stepped back this year.
I want to say, I think, and we've talked about this, I think we talk about it almost every other episode about authentic. While we all have different disciplines in our marketing communications efforts, we say, let's be authentic, whether it's a paid medium, whether it's a media relations. Let's not necessarily show exactly what we can't show, behind the SEC curtains or whatever. But when we can communicate, let's communicate openly, engaging, telling the full truth and not purposely holding cards back. I think authentic is the key word here. And hearing you say that, Kev, just made me smile, because I'm like, I think I want to start a ticker, every time we say authentic over this next year, this is what we have, because authentic is the case. It doesn't matter anything. Be authentic with your employees, be authentic with your customers.
If you're going to say something and you're going to do something, do what you say you're going to do.
Yep.
And then, you've got folks who have come forward. They've put people in place. They have these great DE&I programs. However, they haven't done things to sustain them since this whole George Floyd thing. And communication, like you said, in some cases, while it has fallen off or people have become silent, they're also not following through whatever they have communicated in some cases. So that's even more disappointing to me as well. So I find all of this with regards to not only what's happening with them being silent, but what they do say, they haven't really followed through on in most cases, from my perspective. So
100%. I mean, look at some of the layoffs that are happening in the tech industry right now. A lot of the people that are being let go are part of those DEI teams.
Well, that's also because DE&I has conveniently been put in the recruiting sections of these companies. That's HR. And HR has been a lot of the, when I've looked at LinkedIn and I saw some of the folks communicating that they are, looking and have been laid off. A lot of those are recruiting folks. They're talent acquisition, HR, in addition to that D&I, but they're all in that particular same space. So I don't want to call it convenient, coincidental, or what have you, but it's just ironic that happens to be that group of folks that are being laid off.
Well, it shows where the commitment is or is not, right? And I go back to think about when we talk about, here we go, you can check the box, this authenticity in terms of how we communicate. That was different with the Texans organization yesterday. Cal McNair sat on the stage. He didn't have a script. And I know that that's not a very comfortable space for him. He's not a natural orator. That's not what he does. But yesterday he said a few things, which was enough. And then he turned it over to Nick Casario, who's usually much more robotic. He still is that because that's his DNA. But he was far more human yesterday than I've ever seen him. So what that does is it makes you more believable. It's easier for an audience to connect with you because while it's not perfection, none of us have that, but it's believable. And that is the thing about being believable and relatable. If you're just, listen, this is what we know. This is, we did that, but this is what we're doing now. And this is where we're trying to go. And we hope you go with us in so many words. People appreciate that. Okay, guys, I can try you. All right, I'm in. And that's what I saw yesterday. And that's what these companies who came out with these bold statements in 2020 that didn't live up to them. That's where they're like, well, yeah, I got nothing now. Well, there's got to be somewhere in between. You may not have that, but you got to have something. And so I think they should be pressed. You can't be in the space and not be human. That's just not okay.
I agree. So that's the challenge of business leaders. If you haven't met your targets, that's okay. Tell us about it. Show us action. What are you doing? What are you doing to improve? Has the timeline shifted? You don't have to have all the answers right away. You don't have to make this 180-degree turn overnight. You need to show progress. I think that's something that's incredibly important. But I do want to wrap the show up with this. So it's 2023. I know it's kind of weird to make predictions in February of 2023 instead of, like December of 2023. So I do want to kind of go around the horn really quickly and just, I don't know, give me one prediction of something that you think is going to happen in the comm tech space over this next year. Could be 2 predictions, 3 predictions. Thomas, since you're in the top right of my screen, I will start with you. Give us your hot take, something that is guaranteed to happen this year. And you got to get this right.
I have actually 5 of them.
Wow.
First one is I think propaganda is going to continue to grow. I don't know if it's going to reach the breaking point this year or not. Whether we see what's happening over in Ukraine and Russia with the propaganda monsters, but you're starting to see some of those thought processes, those actions starting to work its way into mainstream media in the United States, and it's a little scary, a little disheartening. So I see propaganda getting a little bit bigger, and that kind of plays into the next one, that companies are going to start taking social media a little more serious, because as we talk about the wage gaps and the earnings and the inflations and everything else like that, you're starting to see a trend of people who are getting laid off or people who are working in toxic culture who are turning to TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn to say this is what's going on behind the scenes. The other one that I see is work from home. I see people starting to actually come back into the office, but I think the companies have to be very careful with how they communicate it. Is if they come out saying everybody's going to come in tomorrow, you're going to have another mass exodus. If the ones who are slowly starting to shift the corporate culture and doing it more discreet, being like, hey, we have a meeting on Wednesday at lunch. Come on in, we'll buy you lunch. And the next thing you know, people will start to come in on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then the last thing I see, so that's 3. I'm only going to give 4, is AI and Chat GPT. I think AI is going to make a bigger splash than we care to admit. You're starting to see people who are putting it through its paces and saying, hey, could this AI software pass a bar exam or pass my law school? And it does with a B+. You see people who are starting to write articles like, give me a story about the Houston Astros with these topics, and it writes it out there. And it doesn't write it to the same level as a seasoned professional, but it still is good. You wouldn't know it, that it was not written by a non-human. So I'm seeing those things starting to really take off. Funny ad, Ryan Reynolds did an ad where he used it. He said, give me an ad on this. And he read it at the very end. He's like, man, that's scary. Because it was almost exactly as he would write it. And so those are my four biggest ones. The last one's the economy. I think that we're still in a wait and see mode with the Fed and everything like that, which affects all of us as communicators. Yeah, we're hearing layoffs in certain sectors. Yeah, we're hearing layoffs in there. Yes, we're hearing hiring freezes or hiring frost. But I still haven't gotten a good read on what the economy is going to do. And I think some of that plays into the propaganda and plays into the work from home kind of mindsets that are taking place.
Interesting, thoughtful ideas. I like those. We'll definitely revisit those toward the end of the year and see kind of where they stand. Kim, what about you?
So I don't have many predictions, but you mentioned the social media platforms, and what it looks like it's heading in a direction where they're all going to be less willing to to control the kinds of things on their platform because they're calling it, free speech, and that's not our responsibility. I think we're going to see more of that, which for me is concerning because I already can tell, like on certain platforms like Twitter, like I'm seeing people who I would never have seen before. Their stuff's on my timeline, and they're not people I follow or that I want to hear from. But I think that these social media platforms, I don't know so much about LinkedIn, but the others, the real social ones, I think that they're going to continue to be less self-regulated. And I don't know what that means at some point if if Congress is going to say, hey, we've got to do something different. But that's one of the trends that I see early on. I think that's going to continue to grow. And one of the things I'm wondering about is whether I'm going to see professional teams, like other NFL teams, in terms of how they communicate. They all have their own departments, right? So they're all basically their own media departments, their own communications that they're putting out, their content. But we also know that that's very sanitized. You still need some third party input. And I'm wondering, I don't know the answer, if you're going to see teams starting to say, you know what, we might need to expand just a bit, not to bring people in house that are going to bash us, but to be more believable. We've got to get beyond just our own staff talking about our own product. That, from a communication standpoint, I'm looking to see if I'm going to see that slowly happen. I don't know yet. I'm waiting on that.
That could be interesting to see.
Yeah.
To have some outside voices come in there. Addie, what give us some predictions that you might have.
I don't have any predictions, but the one thing I was thinking about, you're seeing more schools, such as universities and colleges, or even places that are banning certain social media platforms. And because it's becoming more distracting versus, being helpful to students, in their academics. So that would be interesting if that's going to increase even more. People are, we love technology and we love how we can find out information as quickly as we can. But then there's the fact that it's being also used as a weapon, or it's used for negativity, and it's distracting, and it's really not helping from their perspective. So it'd be interesting to see where that goes from here, more so.
I'm kind of in line with you. So I've got a few predictions, kind of like Thomas did. So the first one is related to Snapchat. I think Snapchat goes bankrupt this year. Their 52-week high was $42-ish a share. Their 52-week low was $7 a share. Currently, their share price is down like 15% because of bad earnings this week. They're losing users. They're losing advertisers, and I think part of that's due to TikTok as well. I think Snapchat ultimately files for bankruptcy this year. My second prediction is TikTok is ultimately banned in the United States, and I think this is going to be a federal government decision, and I think it's only going to be exacerbated by what we saw this past Thursday with the balloon from China that was flying over Montana. It's currently over the central U.S. I mean, if you don't think China isn't using ByteDance to spy on you, you're completely misguided. I mean, I think TikTok is such an addictive app, but it's 100% Chinese spying on us. And I don't know. You have not only Republicans saying this, you have Democrats saying this as well. It's banned on government devices at the federal level. I think it's going to happen. I think one of the interesting things about that balloon, actually, the explanation from the Chinese Foreign Ministry came after the Pentagon officials said that they had detected the balloon. They said it was most certainly launched by the what did they say? They said that they were expressing their regret over the incident and saying the balloon was for civilian research and had deviated far from its planned course, but it just so happened to be over like 150 ballistic missile silos in Montana. Like, I don't think we can buy that story. There's definitely a lot of misinformation coming out of the CCP. So that's another prediction.
Propaganda.
Exactly.
Right.
I think streaming saturation is going to be a big story for this year. Obviously, the news right now with Netflix, with password sharing, I think that's only going to grow. I think other companies are going to crack down on password sharing as well. It's the same thing that you see in the airline industries when, you know, certain airlines start charging for premium economy seats or to have your seat chosen on booking. I think other streaming platforms are going to follow that model. So it's really interesting. I think people are going to start cutting back and realize which streaming platform should I go with? Should I go with Netflix, Hulu? If I can only do 3, which one am I doing? So that's something to watch. Another thing is local news, specifically here in Houston. Houston Chronicle has been the big player for many, many years. Axios launched a Houston newsletter where they sent out like a daily morning newsletter. And then earlier this week, Houston Landing announced that they were going to start, you know, as a nonprofit covering Houston news. Interestingly enough, they said that we need to have more storytellers that cover the news, yet they hired 7 of their 9 journalists from the Houston Chronicle. So is that really solving the problem of access and information here in Houston? I'm not sure. So I think looking at local news and these startup companies coming in, I'm really curious to see what happens with this. It's not really a prediction, but just something to watch. And the last prediction that I have is Meta. I think they take a quiet pivot away from the metaverse this year. I know that that's something that Mark Zuckerberg has really been focused on, but they finally had positive earnings and user growth this past week. And I think that they're going to slowly pivot away from the metaverse and, you know, maybe keep it on the back burner down the line. But I know that that was something they were all in on in 2020, 2021. I don't think that's going to be the key focus for them. I think if TikTok does fail, as I think it will get banned in the United States, that's going to benefit Facebook. That's going to benefit Google. That's going to benefit Twitter, because those ad dollars that people are spending, companies are spending on TikTok, have to go somewhere else.
I'm going to jump on Kim's statement about while the publicly facing thing is getting more and more open in Wild Wild West, the back end is getting more and more locked down. So as an ad buyer on those different things, they're making it extremely hard for people to target the proper customer or to believe and be authentic of, yes, we're advertising to this demographic and those demographics are buying. I think that Google right now is about to be thrown into a lawsuit on the lack of transparency on the ad buying and the targeting and those kind of things. I see Facebook/Meta getting rolled into there. I see all of the social media. And so I'm watching the dichotomy that's taking place in that social media space right now very closely.
Should be a fun 2023, which we think makes for a fun season 5 of the Business Communicators. And, you know, sometimes we'll have episodes like this where it's just us 4 or 2 of us or 3 of us having conversations. Other times we'll have guests on. I think, you know, we're not going to be as guest reliant on the shows this year, but we want to be intentional about the types of guests that we have. So let us know what you think. You know, we want to make sure that we're putting out a product that is good for you guys. We're probably not going to be doing weekly episodes. You know, it might be more of a scattered cadence, but that's okay. We're still going to produce episodes. We're still going to have fun with it. Let us know what you think. Subscribe, like on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Follow us on social media at Biz Communicator. And of course, we'll share all of the personal links as well. Yeah, it's been fun. Kim, we're excited to have you. And
thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you guys for letting me be a part of your space. I appreciate it. And thanks, Hattie, because she was my connection to get me here. So thank you guys.
Yeah, the first time we had you on, like I immediately texted Thomas and I was like, hey, Thomas, you're fired.
True story.
I'm sorry, Thomas.
we brought him back.
I have been fired from the podcast about 3 different times.
Thomas, it wasn't you. It was going to slide her in and I was going to slide out. and you never noticed.
My goal is only to get fired one time this season, not like 3 or 4.
You would have been like, you cool, you good.
All right. Well, guys, it's been so much fun getting to record season 5, episode 1 of the podcast. And on behalf of my co-host, Hattie Horn, Kim Davis, and Thomas Bain, my name's Austin Staton. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.